evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome members to this meeting of Council here at Victoria Mill and thank our hosts, University of Lancashire, for accommodating us. Can I ask everyone to present not to talk amongst themselves during the meeting, as this can be very distracting for others who are listening to the debate. Can I also ask everyone to ensure any mobile devices are switched to silent and do not cause a distraction during the meeting. We are not expecting a fire alarm tonight, but if one should occur, please follow the officers out of the building to the assembly point. This is on the upper level car park for Sandygate Mill, on the opposite side of the driveway next to Victoria Mill. The meeting is being streamed, and I would like to welcome those watching on the Council's YouTube channel. As the meeting is being streamed, can I ask members and officers to speak clearly into the microphone so that viewers can hear proceedings. Please do not speak until you have the microphone in front of you, and do not hold any papers or device in between you and the microphone. Members will be aware that under CPR 2.1, under CPR 20.1, they are required to stand and address the meeting through myself. Given the technical limitations today, I propose that members will not be required to stand to speak. Instead, please raise your hand clearly in the air. You are still required to address the meeting through me. I therefore move CPR 13M, motion without notice to suspend CPR 20.1. Mr. Deputy Mayor, will you second that?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All those in favour of suspending CPR 20.1, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? Abstentions. Thank you. That is carried. CPR 20.1 is suspended for the duration of this meeting, and members should remain in their seats when speaking. Finally, let us all remember to treat members of the public and elected members and officers with respect throughout the meeting as set out in the Code of Conduct for members. Item 1 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting held on 22nd of January 2025. I will move those minutes. Mr. Deputy Mayor, will you second those minutes?
I'll second those minutes, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favour, please say aye. Those minutes are approved. Item 2 on the agenda, declaration of interests. All members have been guaranteed a general dispensation to allow them to participate and vote on Motion 5A relating to the reorganisation of local government. In addition, Councillors Anwar, Khan and Hosker, Reynolds and Ishtiaq have been guaranteed specific dispensations to allow them to participate and vote on Motion 5A due to their disclosable pecuniary interests. All members have been guaranteed a general dispensation to allow them to participate in the debate and vote on the setting of council tax at agenda item 6. Are there any other declaration of interests? Councillor Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's item 6H and 6K. The other interest, non-prejudicial, as a council-appointed trustee of Burnley Leisure and Culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lishman, Margaret Lishman.
It's item 6H, the revenue budget, interest, other, personal, as a trustee of Burnley, Pendle, Rossendale, CVS.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
Item 6.0, appointment of mayor and deputy mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just item 6H to 6K, non-prejudicial interest as the council's representative on Burnley Leisure and Culture.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly. Thank you. Councillor Chowdhury.
Declaring the peculiar interest on 6A.
Thank you. Any other member? I'm going to move on to agenda item 3, Mayor's communication. I would like to invite all of you to join me in marking the National COVID-19 Day of Reflection on Sunday, 9th March at Townley Hall between 11 to 11:45 a.m. I would appreciate if we could see you all there. Thank you. Item agenda 4, public question time. Chief Executive.
Sorry, was somewhere else. None have been received, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, motions to the council. Once a motion has been moved and seconded, members may speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. They may only speak again on an amendment. Item 5A, statutory invitation to reorganise local government. Members will be aware that an agenda supplement was published this afternoon with an altered motion as altered by the leader and a Labour Group amendment on the motion. Councillor Anwar, will you please move your altered motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will move the motion as altered, and just want to say a few words as well in doing so. First thing is that we had an extraordinary meeting that was held of this council to discuss devolution and proposals being put forward. And one of the resolution that came out of that meeting last year that was called by this council was that local government reorganisation would not be a prerequisite to any form of devolution for Lancashire. I think everybody in this room is absolutely clear that we want the best for Lancashire. We want to make sure that we get devolved powers, and we want to have the best deal for Lancashire. But by the same token, there are some of us who don't want to see Burnley Council disappear. But having said all of that, from what we've seen from the white paper that's come from government, and then the letter that's followed from the Minister, there has been a request for a proposal to be put forward for what we want Lancashire to look like in terms of local government reorganisation. So it does appear that local government reorganisation is inevitable. So the purpose of this motion really is to pick out a number of things to highlight, so we can agree here as a council what our red lines are and what is acceptable to us as a council. and how you would then want myself, the leader and the executive to proceed, and how we then try to put forward and put together proposals for what we want or we think could work best for Burnley, but also for wider East Lancashire. My opinion is that one of the proposals put forward by the government around the 500,000 populations is an arbitrary size that's been chosen, and that is what is being pushed by members from across county as being the best way forward, and that would be the model that we're looking for East Lancashire. My personal view on that is that actually what we need to do is look at the identities of our local districts, our local boroughs, and look at what is important to them. So from my point of view, and what I would like to put to this council is that an East Lancashire unitary that would include Burnley being put in with Blackburn is something that just would not work. One, because it would be too big in terms of size, but also because of the identities of our local communities. And so what we would like to do as part of this motion is put forward to say that we want to put together proposals, but look at potentially putting forward a proposal that would say that there would be two unitaries for East Lancashire. And the benefit of that would be, rather than having one voice on any mayoral combined authority, East Lancashire would get two. We'll get two voices on there and be able to have two in terms of voting rights. And so I think what we've got to do is every single one of us has got to work together to put together these proposals. And the other thing that's been spoken about, and again people forget, is that they say that, well, actually the footprint of 3 works for Pennine, Lancashire. And it does exist, but I think nobody will argue with me in this chamber when I say that actually that proposal of you only need to look at the health service and how that's operated for East Lancashire and whether that's been a success or not. We all get complaints about policing, various other issues on that footprint, and it just would not work. But what I'm asking members to vote on here today is that there have been murmurings across East Lancashire, across leaders. There are certain districts who are getting whatever it is that they are asking for from government, and there's been a put in a wink and deals being done behind closed doors. And I think what we need to do is make sure that we're putting together, making our voice heard, so that we get the best, not just for Burnley, but also for East Lancashire. And we need to make sure that we keep all of our identities as well, because all of us across East Lancashire have our distinct identities as part of that. And I, for one, do not think that an East Lancashire unitary for the whole of East Lancashire run from Blackburn is something that the people of Burnley want to see. So, having said that, what I would like to do is move the motion and listen to what members have got to say on that as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you please second the altered motion?
I second the motion, Mr. Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Members, we have an altered motion moved and seconded. And would the meeting signal a consent by saying aye? Aye. Any member? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say I welcome this motion and debate here this evening. Although I would say starting now is a bit late, on the understanding that we received the devolution white paper and the Minister's letter devolution white paper in December and the Minister's letter in January, both laid out the timescales, and we're now here within less than 3 weeks of potentially having to lay our cards on the table, and members haven't been involved to any great extent. I hear what Councillor Anwar says, and imposing red lines is not a bad thing, but I think everybody would agree that red lines have to be backed up by evidence. And it's okay just saying that there's an arbitrary criteria that governments have laid down of 500,000 people, and any decisions or any ways of moving forward shouldn't be based on that criteria, but then to have red lines that are based around the same kind of arbitrary and subjective type criteria isn't helpful either. And it's because, really, have we done the work behind the scenes before we're starting to lay down any red lines in terms of what we would like to see? I would just say about the motion as well, it does seem to have been thrown together a little bit. It just seems to be a bit random in terms of the way it jumps around. And when it talks about finances, I think there are pretty poor examples that are picked out when it talks about Birmingham and Northamptonshire. Yes, they have both gone through problems, but it was nothing to do with them becoming unitary authorities. When you look at Birmingham, it was about an equal pay fiasco that happened quite a number of years ago, so nothing about reorganisation. And when you look at the report into Northamptonshire and why that failed, it was all about austerity and councillors grandstanding at the time, not being prepared to put council tax up over a number of years. They're identified as the faults behind that. So, you know, we need to do a lot more thinking and have a lot more evidence before we start basically laying down some red lines. I think at this stage, confidence building with our residents, we need to ensure the widest possible consensus. And I understand through discussions internally within the council that the decision on how we move forward from here can be down to just the leader and the executive. And I think that that's not really appropriate for this council when you think about the appropriateness in terms of the leader and the executive not being a majority of this council. Every councillor in this room deserves a say and a vote on how we move forward. This is a 50-year decision. It's not 6 months, it's not 12 months. The last local government reorganisation lasted 50 years. And it's right that everybody in this chamber has the right to have their voice heard and their vote counted right the way through this process. So the Labour group, we have put an amendment together that works towards everybody in this council chamber having a say over these now and in moving forward towards autumn when the detailed proposals have to go in. So really it's just making sure that any signatory from this council that goes onto a piece of paper covering anything over these next few weeks is really worth the paper it's written on and has the support of this council, which I think is important. And we need a resolution to support that, not a briefing, not a discussion at scrutiny. It needs to be done in this council chamber so our residents have clear visibility that everybody's had a say and this is the way that the council wants to move forward. Beyond that, we need to do better than what we've done already. We really need a working group to establish, to inform the executive and the leader of the feelings of all members in this council as we move towards the autumn and final proposals have got to go in. I know it's probably a little bit late for the interim plan, even though the interim plan, I believe, and Labour Group believes, still needs a resolution of this council. So we need to ensure that whatever we're doing is not just populist. What we believe is going to be electorally right in May. This is a big decision for serious people. It's a 50-year decision. It's got to be bigger than that. And we need to think about it carefully. So the Labour amendment has been published. But I will just add, Mr Mayor, that we have added some words since to item B, well, B resolution. I will read it out in its completeness so everybody's got it. Currently, it reads, oppose the centralisation of services to Blackburn and resist any proposal that would merge the boroughs of Burnley and Blackburn together with other East Lancashire boroughs into a single unitary authority. And then I'm proposing that we add the words, resist will include this council not being a signatory to any interim plan submission that includes any such option without a resolution of this council. Now move the amendment, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And is that seconded?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second that motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. So we have a seconder to that. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? I've got Councillor Anwar and then Hosker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could I move an adjournment of 5 minutes, just so that I've not had a chance to discuss the actual amendment that's been proposed with my group, and I'm sure others haven't as well. So could I move an adjournment, please?
Yes, and do you want to move it and then?
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a motion to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. Will that do? Yeah. 5 minutes, and we have a seconded for that motion. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Right, so the meeting is adjourned for 5 minutes.
Members of the Council, please be upstanding. Thank you. gentlemen, please be upstanding to receive the worship of the Mayor of Burnley, Councillor Shah Hussain. Thank you.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, so we've had an amendment. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment?
Councillor Oscar.
Sorry, Councillor Hosker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Townsend just mentioned about having voices heard. Let's be clear on this. It's your Labour MPs would have suggested that we at Burnley going with Blackburn. The people of Apton, who I speak to, Padiham and Burnley, don't feel their voices are being heard. They don't want to go in with Blackburn. Simple. And I think it's time the MPs got this message through and started remembering who they're supposed to be representing. They're supposed to be representing this town. Well, I don't see it that way. If you're not going to listen to what people are saying, why the MPs?
Thank you, Councillor Hosker. Any other member? Councillor Anwar, and then Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on that, with regards to the motion, just want to pick up on a couple of points that were made. First one was around, obviously, the devolution white paper came out in December, letter came out in January, and we brought this in March. In terms of why is it, why has this taken so long? There's lots and lots of work that's taking place in the background, but the key issue here is that it's not us as a council, that we're being forced to rush into this. The whole issue with this local government reorganisation and the way that the government are pushing this agenda is being done at such a pace that we're having to work very, very quickly. We had to bring this item here to this meeting, otherwise the next full council is in April. We'd miss the date on that, with the deadline being the 21st of March. Have we done the work? We're in the process of working with other leaders across and officers across Lancashire to try to do all the work that we can. But I think in terms of what the motion is asking for is asking for us to basically come back as a council before we go back and put them interim plans in, asking us to come back and agree a resolution or to vote on it before our plans would then end up in as part of any paper that goes to government. What that risks is two things in my mind, and the first thing that risks is it sends a message that actually that we're not singing off the same hymn sheet, we're not talking to one another, and we're not working collaboratively here in Burnley. We don't have a clear message. And secondly, what it risks is the potential that if we don't agree something, we could potentially not have any plan from Burnley going as part of those proposals that go to government on the 21st of March. So, and I think for me that's something that's really, really risky. And I think what we have to do is trying to be as a leader or as an executive, we're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can to ensure that everybody gets a say in this, and we put something forward that everybody. And I'm glad actually that because I read a post from Councillor Townsend the other day where he was saying that this was Project Fear, and I'm glad he's come round to our way of thinking that we are that actually we do need a plan. It needs to be a joint one for the whole of and represents the views of the people of Burnley. What we need to do is get these interim proposals in. We need to have a seat at the table when we're talking to Lancashire leaders, so that our proposals of 2 unitaries or whatever proposal that we come up with, 2 unitaries for East Lancashire, are there and are sent through to government. The full and proper and final debate, we will have a chance to do that once we have to put the final proposals in November, and we can do that at September's council. We'll have a proper time frame in which we can actually consult stakeholders, residents, all of us as members, we can have that discussion then. And I think that's when that takes place. But for these interim proposals, the key thing is for us to ensure where there will be other councils who are chucking us in with Blackburn and various other proposals, we need to make sure that we get our proposals in that say that we want to have 2 separate unitaries for East Lancashire. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, the way I see this now, just for the council's benefit, is this is ultimately a Labour proposal to abolish Burnley Borough Council, whether or not we're talking about merging with Blackburn or whether or not we're talking about not merging with Blackburn. The idea now is to close down Burnley Council and merge us into unitary authorities. That's been set out by the Labour Party in government, and there's nothing that any councillor in this place can do about that. The thing that I find ironic is only at the back end of last year we had Labour MPs, including our former Labour MP, now sitting as an independent, putting forward a document that called specifically for Burnley to be merged with Blackburn. Now, what I originally thought with this consultation period that's taking place, we've heard that in March we have to give a preliminary decision about the direction of travel we're going, and by November the minister is going to have discretion over which idea to choose. And there are many on the table. We've seen the ideas of Chorley, we've seen the ideas of Hamburn, we've seen the ideas from all across Lancashire. The idea that Burnley is deciding this, as Councillor Townsend's mentioning, between ourselves, we're part of a much wider picture that his party is imposing on the whole of Lancashire. Originally, I did think to myself that, well, maybe there is some call for us to get involved and potentially sway the decision for the benefit of residents. Some in this council will say the red line is Blackburn, but there are other things that we need to take into consideration. But the one thing that kind of changed my mind on this was last week when out of the blue we all found the news that the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner come out with saying that we would have a Mayor of Lancashire by 2026. Now that took everybody by surprise, because up until that point we thought it was at least 27, 28 even, and it would go hand in hand with the local government reorganisation we're debating now. It says to me that the 2 schools of thought that I'd listened to, one of which said, optimistic, we can get involved, we can have a consultation, we can see what's best for everybody. I was kind of on that train, and I thought, yeah, that makes sense. Surely that's what they'd do. But the idea that that's actually the case is fading in my mind. Given Angela Rayner's comments about a mayor, I'm sure that if they have plans set in place already for the mayor, the idea that they don't have plans for what they're going to do to reorganise Lancashire seems to be a little bit naive to think, unless they're incompetent. Now, many can say, yes, Labour are an incompetent party and they probably don't have the plans, but I won't bet on it. So whether or not we have a full council meeting before we send off this initial progress by the end of March, frankly, is irrelevant. Because one thing is the time will have already passed. 20th we'd have the meeting, 21st everybody in Lancashire's got to send off their thing. So when does the leader have chance to actually speak to everybody else in Lancashire to get something together, or at least put Burnley's view in? And then second is Councillor Townsend, and I hope he picks up on this point, is he not being a little bit disingenuous to suggest that we do actually have a say on this, and it's not all just packed up, ready to go, and it's just waiting to be rolled out in a next prepared announcement by Angela Rayner, like we heard with the Mayor? Thank you, Mr. Burnley Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan. Hopefully not the last. Any other member? No. And Councillor Townsend, as the mover of the motion, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for everybody's contributions, because, as I said at the outset, this is a really important debate about the long-term future of our residents within what looks like it's going to be a reconfigured Lancashire going forward. I think the whole essence of what I was trying to drive at today is, and we know there is feeling about who should be partnering with who, in terms of taking this process forward. and it already seems that, like, the Leader of the Council has already formed some views in terms of what a unitary council should look like for Burnley, and who we shouldn't be partnering with, etc. Although, again, it's not backed up with any evidence, even though there's press releases going out. The main issue I've got is the word in the motion that Councillor Anwar put forward. It says resist. We will resist. So where does resist start? It has to start now, doesn't it? And what form does that take? Or is it just a word on a piece of paper, resist? How are you resisting this? How are we resisting something that potentially all the members or many members in this authority may agree with? As soon as there is a signature on that piece of paper on the 21st of March going to London with a Burnley Council signature on it that includes options below it, that includes unitary authorities potentially with Blackburn and Burnley in the same one, that is basically saying that Burnley says they are viable options. And if they come through at the end of the day, that is what government will be pointing to, saying, you put your name to a document, it had that option within it. Now, we have the chance between now and the 21st of March to close that down by having a full council meeting, looking at all those options in detail. None of us have seen them here today. Councillor Anwar might have, but I certainly haven't. And closing it down and saying what resistance looks like. Now, if we're serious about it, it starts today. If it isn't, then we move on. And I wonder when that resistance starts and in what form it takes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Anwar, as mover of the motion, you have the right of reply. All right, okay. So that's wrong. Okay, we'll now move to a vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? No. So that motion is not carried. So we're going to move back to the original motion, and based on the motion, any members wish to speak? Councillor Lishman.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think for me, we have to stay at the table. And my first comment would be that, yes, I think it is right to start look at change and to look at reorganisation. But my concern is particularly the pace at which central government are setting us and the configurations that they are suggesting makes me fear the results. Their initial comment was that we had to look at a population of 500,000. We've all seen how well, and I take Councillor Townsend's point about there being other issues perhaps in places like Birmingham, but I think those of us that have experienced how Lancashire County Council works for all of the years that we've had that in place, and how well their system of dividing everything equally between the various districts works, with no waiting for deprivation, etc., then we know that that sort of arrangement doesn't work. But even the government about the 500,000 is changing. They've now said that if there are good reasons to change, then those will be considered. Equally, they are saying that they're going to control the consultation centrally. And that causes me concern, because the way you ask questions quite often predisposes what sort of answers you're going to get. For unitaries to work successfully, those in each area need to have things in common, and they need to want to work with each other. And I think I can guarantee you that if you stop the majority of people on the street in Burnley, Padiham, Hapton, any of those areas, and you say to them, do you want to go into a unitary authority? Or, let's put it more simply, do you want to go into a government arrangement with Blackburn? The answer will be no. What this motion does is gives us that clear guidance for the leader and for the executive to go and have those discussions with all the other boroughs who are all going through the same thing at the same time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to wonder, why are we proposing to start this process with preconceived ideas? We wouldn't go into a planning meeting without having made a decision, without first listening to all parties before we do come to a decision. And the motion does read as though we've already made our mind up what we want. In listening to the original proposals, citing us from being so different from Blackburn, I have to ask you, does that mean you view Pendle Council to be a failure? Because the towns across that borough all have very, very different identities. I'd go further and remind you that across our own borough, we also have towns and villages that take pride locally in their own uniqueness. I also wonder, what is the relevance of the North Yorkshire example? Its creation isn't compatible to our situation at all. However, it's notable that despite the 3 million quoted as unnecessary expenditure in the motion, the expectation was that that reorganisation would result in savings of around £50 million. I believe we would all agree what is important is to better understand what factors have most impacted on the successes and failures of those that went before. You also mentioned the advantage of 2 seats if East Lancashire can be split into 2 unitaries. However, it should be observed that representation should be equitable for all residents across Lancashire, and 2 seats at the top table should not be at the expense of those who live in Leyland or Lancaster. Finally, local government reorganisation could be viewed as an opportunity to learn and to help our local residents achieve better life outcomes. I would ask that the leader goes into all these discussions with an open mind and an open heart.
Thank you. Councillor Lorna. Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Anwar, as the mover of the amendment and of the motion, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to pick up on a couple of points, the issue around that we would have two voices on an East Lancashire unit on any combined authority that would be formed. And Councillor Barton raises issues that should not be at the expense of any other person, any other boroughs like Leyland or any others she may have mentioned. But the fact of the matter is, the way that this is being, if we don't have a seat at the table, the way that this is being imposed on us, others from those areas are actually doing exactly that. They are taking away our voice and taking it away at our expense. That's what they are doing. And you know, we're having to do this, and as I said, and Councillor McGowan makes a very valid point. What we've had is that we could do all of this, we could make all the noise that we want, put things on record, but the deal may already have been done. The murmurings I hear is that, you know, Chorley have got what they want and South Ribble have got what they want. So my argument is well, why can't Burnley get what Burnley wants? Why is it one rule for them? Where's the equity in that? And so there needs to be a proper consultation. We need to be given the opportunity to do that. But my fear is, as Councillor McGowan said, this could be something that's imposed on us. One minute we're getting an announcement that's saying that, you know, mayors will be coming in 27, and as you rightly say, you know, we heard the announcement last week that we will have a mayor by 2026. We were told to move ahead with the CCA, and then we called an emergency extraordinary meeting of this council, agreed a resolution, and then a few weeks later, when even Labour colleagues were expecting one thing, something else came out from the Minister. So this could be something that is imposed on us. But what we have to do is we do have to, and Councillor Townsend is right, we do have to resist. How are we resisting that? We're resisting that by actually bringing this here to Council for us to discuss it and to debate it and hear people's voices. And we will bring it back when before the final proposals go in. As Councillor Lorna rightly says, officers are working extremely hard to make sure that, you know, we get the best possible proposals that for Burnley. And in terms of what am I doing, up until my involvement or getting involved in speaking, as far as Labour East Lancashire leaders were concerned, the deal was done. They wanted an East Lancashire unitary, and that it was only when I resisted and said to them, well, actually, no, we need to bring this back to the table, and we've got them back round the table and talking to us and actually listening to what we've got to say. And it might not go anywhere, but actually we might get to the point where we do get to a proposal for, you know, and getting them to agree to 2 unitaries for East Lancashire. So, but we do need to fight this. It might be something, as I say, it's, you know, the deals may have been done behind closed doors, but we need to fight it and do what we can to show that we're doing the best for the residents of Burnley. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And colleagues, I just want to say a couple of words. And we've heard strong arguments today on this motion. Firstly, it's clear recognition. It's a clear recognition that the current 2-tier system of local government is confusing and often inefficient. However, while change is needed, the government's proposed approach is not the right solution in my eyes for Burnley or Lancashire. The arbitrary 500,000 population threshold for unitary authorities is not based on solid evidence. Large councils do not automatically guarantee financial stability. Indeed, when you look at Birmingham, Northampton, both failed despite their size, and many smaller authorities have remained stable and delivered high-quality services. There is also a significant concern that larger unitary councils would weaken local accountability. We know that bigger is not always better, and we must ensure that decision-making remains close to the communities it affects. Another key issue raised today is the lack of meaningful local consultation. We cannot allow this process to be dictated by others while Burnley stands by. If we do not take a lead, other councils will. We will risk being placed in a structure that does not serve our residents' best interests. We must engage fully and build partnerships. and there's different ways that was being discussed as to how we develop that vision for the future of East Lancashire. Crucially, there's a strong opposition to any proposal that merges Burnley and Blackburn into a single unitary authority or centralises services in a way that makes them harder to access. We must stand firm in protecting Burnley's identity and ensuring that local government works for our town. So finally, with regards to reorganisation, let it not distract from the real crisis that our local communities are facing, and that is underfunding of social care and adult social care. And no structural change will be successful unless government, past and present, properly funds adult and children's social care services. So, in summary, I hope people support this, Council supports this motion, and it must be the right motion, it must be the right reform that we're looking for. So, we will engage with the process, but we need to advocate for smaller, in my eyes, we need to advocate for a smaller, more locally accountable unitary authorities that protect services and strengthen local democracy. I thank members for their contribution. I will now move to a vote. All those in favour? I thought thank you, Councillor Baker. I thought I'd use my mayoral duty or responsibility to say those words. But if Councillor Anwar wished to reply to my words, you're more than welcome to do so.
I'd just like to thank you for your kind observations, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the vote. Those all in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? That motion is carried. Item number 6 on the agenda, items for decision by the Council. Can I remind members that items for decision by the Council are treated as motions. Therefore, once a proposal has been moved and seconded, members may speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. Members may then only speak again on an amendment. Where appropriate, the relevant extract from the minutes of the meeting of the Executive held on 19th of February is included in the main agenda pack just before the relevant report. The minute extracts highlight recommendations to the Council in bold text. Before we start the debate on the 2025 to 26 budget, there are 5 items of business to consider first. These are items 6A, 6B, 6C, 6D and 6E, and I will take those individually. We will then proceed to budget for 25-26, and these are items 6F, G, H, I, J and K, and I will take those en bloc. Members will be aware the reports of the agenda items 6I and 6G were published in a supplementary agenda pack on 27th of February. Though these reports could only be completed after Lancashire County Council met on the 26th of February, I would like to remind members that a recorded vote is required to be taken on the budget and on any amendments made to it. As I mentioned earlier, please do not speak until you have the microphone in front of you. That is when the recorded vote comes along. After the budget items have been considered, I will take the rest of the items on the agenda individually. Agenda item 6A, report on independent remuneration panel. Members will be aware that we have received alternative proposal from the Labour Group, which has published in a supplement yesterday. Although entitled amendment, it is an alternative proposal. Have members had the opportunity to read and discuss those alternative proposals, Or would you like an adjournment? Oh, okay. So we'll now take the motion on item 6A in two parts. Members, so two parts, well, I mean, first the backwards look and the forward look. Will any member move a motion in relation to recommendation 3A that previously approved 2022, 23, 24, 25 scheme and any award for 2024, 25 backdated to 1st April 24, 25? Councillor Townsend.
I just want to say a few words generally before just moving to the proposal. First of all, I'd like to thank the Independent Remuneration Panel for all their hard work and basically talking to members over a number of months and coming up with their proposals. I think it's always disappointing when we reach a point where perhaps the IRP's recommendations are not being taken up by this council, and it makes it more difficult for members then in terms of doing it, because instead of it being a totally independent decision, it does become a political decision. And I recognise that a number of members and, well, I think the whole council recognises the budget challenges that this council faces, and we do that, you know, in thinking about the allowances that we take for the work that we do. I recognise that panel feedback from members was that they did not want the scheme to become stagnant or become out of kilter with neighbouring authorities, and I think that always comes through every time many members speak. But there is a consensus as well that we want to reduce the cost of governance. But as far as I think I'm concerned, and I'm sure many members, any reductions or the burdens of perhaps not taking IRP recommendations has to be, the burden has to be shared fairly and not disproportionately hit those who receive the least from councillor allowances. So it can't just be about freezing basic allowances. The principle is that, and I think many members share this, is that those with the broadest shoulders take their fair share of any burden when it comes to cost savings. So anything that we do in this area, I think, has to be a mix of amending basic allowances and special responsibility allowances, not one or the other, so everybody basically makes their contribution. So I am putting forward a plan to reduce budgets, but in a fair and equitable way, having noted that there was a recommendation for 25-26 to freeze, and I think, well, for all 3 years, for there to be a freeze in basic allowances. So first of all, I move, the proposal I put forward has been issued. It is a supplement, as you said, Mr. Mayor. I move resolution A of that paper, which is basically that we accept the IRP recommendation of a 2.5% increase for 24-25, but special responsibilities are not commensurately increased and they are frozen at the 23-24 level. I will note in putting that forward that this year's budget allowed for a 5% increase in councillor allowances, and what we're suggesting here is 2.5%. So there is still a saving to council budgets for this year. And anything that we do agree, if we do, would be basically retrospective back to the 1st of April 2024, because we haven't had an increase in allowances this year. To not do anything would be a retrospective pay cut. I think everybody should realise we did actually agree what we should do this year 3 years ago. It was a 3-year arrangement, so we're not doing anything that basically is outside of that original agreement, and the 2.5% is the lowest of what staff increases were this year, which is what we had linked it to. So I move para A of the supplement, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second that.
Any member on this amendment? Councillor McGowan and then Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to put it on record straight away. We all heard my views on councillors' allowances at the last full council meeting. I won't be supporting an increase. I think that, especially considering we've just moved on from an item talking about the abolition of the council to then increase council allowances, I just think, for 3 years, I just think, well, no. It's, I was surprised to see Councillor Townsend's amendment to effectively a motion which would have seen councillors' allowances frozen, but there, I guess we are where we are, but I won't be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do feel a need to speak on this. Like Councillor McGowan last year, I voted against councillors' allowances being increased. I cannot support this motion for a number of reasons, one of which is we're basically putting ourselves out basically like Animal Farm, George Orwell. So all men are equal, but some are more equal than others here. Councillors' allowances should not be going up, full stop. They should not be going up. And to say that, I don't know, is there anybody in this particular chamber at this moment in time that is a councillor for the councillor's allowance? If you can you stick your hands up? Nobody. None of us are here for the councillor's allowance. What we're here for is to represent the residents of our respective areas, not for the allowance that being a councillor gives us for carrying out council duties. Now, I can understand Councillor Townsend. Quite obviously, myself and him sit on various committees, one of them is licensing, along with other councillors here, such as Councillor Kelly. Just 2 weeks ago, I spent the entire day at Burnley Town Hall on a licensing issue, the entire day, from 10 o'clock in the morning until just after 6 o'clock in the evening. I spent the following, or the next Friday, from 1 o'clock until 5:30 in the council on the same licensing hearing. The following week, I spent time at another licensing hearing for private hires. I am not here to get a councillor's allowance. I am here to represent my residents in Whittlefield and Ironhill. I am also here to represent the residents of all of Burnley. We should not be raising councillors' allowances. I didn't vote for it last year, like Councillor McGowan didn't, and I'm not voting for it this year. As I say, we're not in Animal Farm on George Orwell. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I can acknowledge Councillor Whitaker's remarks there about none of us are here for the allowances, I would just like to highlight that the time that you have been able to dedicate, Councillor Whitaker, is not available to me as a full-time employed single person with a mortgage to pay. And as much as I'm not here for the allowances, they do in fact limit what I can and cannot do, because if I need to spend time doing council work, that often comes at the expense of having to take time unpaid out of my workplace, as was the case when I was scrutiny chair last year. And without that additional allowance for scrutiny chair, that would have been a privilege that I could not have afforded to accept. So I'm very pleased that you are in a stable financial position, that these things don't have to matter to you. But I would like you to acknowledge that for many people out in our borough, being involved in local politics is a luxury that they don't have the financial capacity to be involved in.
Thank you. Any other member? We'll go to a vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Thank you. Or any abstentions? That motion is carried. I'll now move to part 2 of item 6A. Will any member move a motion in relation to recommendation 3B? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
On from what we did through 2024-25, the motion I would like to move.
If I can just clarify that this motion, recommendation 3B, is a proposed member allowance scheme for 25 to 2026 and 26 to 27. Carry on, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you.
Sorry about the interruption.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important to clarify what we're actually talking about. The supplement that we presented yesterday and has been published includes resolutions, proposals B and C. And if we look at B first, it is recommending that basically we freeze councillor allowances for 2025-2026, so they will remain the same as 2024 and 2025. And that is in accordance with basically discussions that the executive have been having previously about balancing the budgets going forward for this year. In terms of 2026 and 2027, I think it's important, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, that we should look at that again, rather than freeze councillor basic allowances. I propose that we defer a decision on 2026 and 2027, but set the parameter that the budget overall for councillor allowances remains the same as the previous year, so no increase. But how we actually achieve that, we should work out as councillors over the next few months before that would actually be implemented in over 12 months' time. So it gives us time to work that out, whether it would be from basic allowances, from special responsibility allowances, or a combination of both to achieve that goal. But the overall aim is that, well, the overall parameters are that councillor allowances will not increase over those 2 years. We just have to work out in the second year how we will actually achieve that as a team, probably through member structures working group. So I move B and C from the supplement that was presented yesterday. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second that.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so I've got this right, Councillor Townsend is proposing to freeze allowances for the coming year, 25 to 26, and then defer a decision in 26 to 27. I'm getting a nod from Councillor Townsend on that. So I just wanted to say on this, obviously I welcome that proposal. Obviously we had a bit of a difference of opinion on last year's, but for this, yes, I welcome it. And I will say one of my biggest gripes is the actual process that we have as a council, and I think we do need to sit down as a council and discuss how how these allowances are sorted, because the one thing that really gets under my skin is that we sit in a full council budget meeting every year, vote for an increase to councillors' allowances, and then vote for an increase in council tax following it. And it doesn't sit well with me, and it never will sit well with me. I think that there is a 4-year cycle for the election of councillors, with the 4th year being a county election. Whether that system changes or not, the idea that I proposed at the scrutiny committee was to have it set in a 4-year cycle once, and councillors, if they have to make a decision on it, take the decision once in a 4-year period, rather than this continuous every single year having to make the same vote, because it's uncomfortable for everyone, I presume. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to coming on what Councillor McGowan said there, I think that the last thing that any of us want to be doing is voting on council allowances on Budget Council, and it's the independent remuneration panel that makes the recommendation, and obviously then we're having to vote on that, and it's their recommendations. But I think what we've got to tonight is probably the most sensible way of dealing with this really sensitive issue, in the way that the decision around 24-25 that's been made is a retrospective one. It's one that was previously made, so we're just sticking to that, although a reduced increase. And then for all of us to agree, which is what all of us want in this room, or said we'd do, is that we would freeze council allowances for this year. And I think the suggestion that what we need to do is have a look at it through Member Structures Working Group is a good suggestion. But the key thing in that is that the actual budget that remains for council allowances stay the same. And I think it's for us as members to decide how we want those to work out. So I think we've arrived. It's taken us a little bit longer than what we would have liked, but I think we've got to the position. And I think just to go back to the point that Councillor Barton was making was a very good one in the sense that none of us know the personal financial positions of any other, and I think we need to be mindful of that as well, because one person's circumstances can be very different to another's, and we need to be mindful of that, as I say. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other member? Councillor Townsend, you have the right of reply.
I just welcome the contributions of members there, and basically just to add on to what Councillor McGowan was saying, I would just say that yes, we are freezing 25-26, but it's effectively a freeze in the overall budget for 26 and 27 as well. We just need to work out the details of how we achieve that, and I'm sure we can do that collaboratively through Member Structures Working Group. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And we'll now go to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That motion is carried. Agenda item 6B, Strategic Plan 2025 to 2030. Councillor Anwar, will you move the report's recommendation?
I move the report's recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lishman, will you second that?
Second the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just say I welcome this revision to the strategic plan. It's probably been a little bit overdue in terms of how long we had the old one, but it's great to have this refresh. I think certainly before we left the administration 18 months ago, we certainly did think that it needed a refresh, and it's good to see it here today. And I'm sure, although we agree on the overall goals and aspirations and what we want to do as a town, when we get to the individual detail of the policies and things like that, we will have our differences, but we'll treat them in good spirit and respect, as we always do when we go through council meetings in the future on the strategic reports. But very much welcome this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other member? Those all in favour, please show. Thank you. Those against, please show. Any abstentions? No. So, for information, that the full council be recommended to adopt new strategic plan 2025 to 30 following a 6-week consultation. How has it happened? This one. I'm very good today. I've been following instructions. Agenda item 6C, Revenue Monitoring Report, Quarter 3. Quarter 3, 2024 to 2025, and Quarter 3 to 31st December 2024. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you move the report's recommendation?
Move the report's recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Anwar, will you second those?
I second those, Mr. Mayor.
Any member? Those all in favour, please show. If you could keep your hands up, so, yeah. Please, thank you. Thank you. Those against, please show. Any abstentions? Thank you. This item is carried. Agenda item 6D, Capital Monitoring Report 2024 to 25 and up to 31st December 24. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you move the recommendations in the report?
Move the recommendation in the report, Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you. Councillor Anwar, will you second those?
Second those, Mr. Mayor.
Any member? All those in favour, please show. If you could keep your hands up so that... Yeah. Thank you. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? Thank you. This item is carried. Agenda item 6E, 2024 to 25, Treasury Management Quarter 3, April to December. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you move the recommendation in the report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will move the recommendations, and I crave patience for you all to listen to me. I am going to stand up to do this because it doesn't feel right to do a budget speech for next year sitting down. So despite the... sorry?
It's treasure.
I'm going to do treasury management.
Treasury management.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
I'm ahead. I move treasury management.
I'll second.
And I'll keep quiet.
It would have been fun to have two speeches.
Not for long.
He's been fasting. What's your
Right, any member on that item? Councillor Townsend.
Turned over 2 pages.
I'd just like to say thank you to the Treasury Management team. I think they do an absolutely sterling job, year in, year out, and many of the things that this council does through its projects are many times due to the decisions made by the Treasury Management team in terms of how they invest, how they borrow, things like that, and it's fantastic. I think that all councillors in this chamber can have real confidence in that team to deliver year in, year out, and allow us to do some of the things that we do for our residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? This item is carried. Right, agenda items 6F to 6K, the budget for 2025 to 26. All these items will be taken together. I shall use my discretion on 5-minute rule and may allow members to speak longer. Members will be aware that we have received an amendment to the budget from the Labour Group, which was published in the supplement to the agenda yesterday. We have also received an amendment from the Conservative Group just before noon today. This was published to the agenda this afternoon. Once the reports have been moved and seconded, I intend to invite Councillor Townsend and then Councillor McGowan to speak. I will then open the debate to the floor for any member to speak. For any motion or amendment debated as part of the budget, a recorded vote is required. The Chief Executive will give the roll call and members should cast their vote as for, against or abstain. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you move the reports and recommendations from the Executive?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and you will all have noticed that having started it already, it shows where my mind has been focused throughout this meeting. So I make no apologies. I think my mind should be focused on it. Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, I'd like to begin by thanking all of those involved in helping to prepare this budget, and particularly the people in the Council's Finance Department. They do an extremely good job on behalf of the Council and on our town, and we are all grateful for their service. Since last year's budget, we've had a change of national government from Conservative to Labour, and a change of MP locally, who was Labour until recently, and I expect will be so again. Like many in this chamber, I hoped that a new administration would acknowledge the value of local government and that funding for our vital local services would improve. As I shall tell you shortly, this is regrettably not the case. This new government has done what others have done before it, made promises to the electorate before the election, but now tell us that everything is much worse than they expected and that things cannot change quickly. The financial environment in which this council operates is challenging, particularly in the context of continuing austerity. A key part of our strategic planning is to align resources with service priorities and to provide early identification of opportunities for efficiency and cost improvement programs. This gets harder year by year. Details of the government's provisional settlement for 25-26 were received on December the 18th. It was not a welcome Christmas present. It is a settlement for 1 year only, with no guidance about settlements for future years. Burnley's core spending power for 2025-26 will increase by 1.8%, compared with 5.3% in 2024-25. I will remind members that Burnley, with all the challenges that we face, has consistently fared worse in terms of spending power reductions and increases compared with the national average. When setting out our settlement, the government assumes that we will set a council tax increase of approximately 3% for our residents. As in previous years, we have considered all the other factors in our calculations, and this year we have taken the decision to recommend an increase of 2% rather than the government's figure of 3%. We believe that by doing so, we can ensure that services and staffing costs can be met by the council, and we can reduce the extra burden on residents by that amount. However, I remind members and residents that Burnley's share of the whole council tax bill is only 14% of the whole. The rest is taken up by the County Council, the Combined Fire Authority, and the Police and Crime Commissioner. Burnley's share for a Band D property translates into an increase from the 2025 level of £337.82 to £344.58, a total of £6.76 per household, which will this year yield a total of £8,305,756. As members know, and you've heard it in this chamber, we're known as the Coalition of Calm. One important thing we have learnt working together as a coalition is the importance of listening and discussing before decisions are made. With this in mind, the Council's executive decided to do things differently this year. We approached opposition groups for their ideas on the budget. Our aim was to allow adequate time for consideration of any initiatives they might suggest, rather than hearing about them for the first time at this meeting as amendments, when all the calculations and hard work has already been done. We are pleased that this led to a good discussion with both Conservative and Labour groups, which is reflected in the budget I am presenting tonight and in the amendment that the Labour group will propose and which we are minded to accept. However, I note the Conservatives' late amendment, which has been tabled, and there will be more discussion on that later. Members will also see that we recommended no increase in members' allowances for 25-26, and I am grateful for the discussion that we have just had and the conclusions that we have come to. It was not a decision that was taken lightly, and it was made in full consciousness of the time and commitment which the review panel took to arrive at their recommendations. However, this council has a finite amount of money, and the decision for this year is that that money should be spent on services for Burnley residents rather than for ourselves. Decisions on how much councillors receive should be agreed on a national basis and included in the settlement from government, rather than decided in the arbitrary way that decisions are made at present by each council individually. I'll now move on to talk about the growth items we are recommending, but before doing so, I will mention two initiatives that were agreed at last year's budget meeting. The Town Centre Antisocial Behaviour Officer is working well, with regular patrols daily with police officers and with their attendance at a variety of key meetings about the town centre. Using the Public Protection Order, 46 formal written warnings have been issued, and there has been one prosecution for persistent begging. This post will be made permanent in this budget. The Housing Standards Damp and Mould Officer is also making an impact with 3 key strands of work: building relationships with the health sector and third-party organisations, undertaking proactive area audits, and carrying a specific caseload of properties with more severe damp and mould problems. The Council has limited resources, and these two examples show how targeted interventions can start to make a real difference. There is a recommendation in this year for a Ward Opportunities Fund pilot of £5,000 per ward, with very clear criteria developed around the scheme's remit. This will enable councillors to fund small local schemes, including both capital and revenue items. In addition, we have listened carefully to residents, including their comments in responding to the resident survey. There will be a one-off pilot scheme across the borough to tackle the 40% increase in requests for fly tipping removal and general cleansing, which has happened between 2022 and 2024. 2 Grade 7 enforcement posts will be created, one to tackle dog fouling and the other to target waste deposited on back streets. Within the capital budget, there is funding for a mobile CCTV AMPR trailer, and the running costs will be met within the revenue budget. It is also recommended that a spare refuse collection vehicle is utilised on Saturdays to provide each ward with 2 collection dates per year for community clean-ups. All these items form part of the overall plan to address residents' concerns. Resources will be targeted, and the 3 E's of enforcement, education and encouragement will be key to the success. There will be an amendment from the Labour group which is aimed at improving bulky waste collection, and this is in addition to the growth items I have already mentioned, and I thank colleagues for the chance to consider this in advance of the meeting. It is also intended to recruit 3 additional gardener posts in green spaces to support our neighbourhood teams in achieving the service standards for maintenance of green spaces. The aim is to address areas where we can do better, such as maintenance of vegetation and hard infrastructure in our green spaces, which are over-mature and ageing, highway weed control, which has increased as a result of the climate change impact of wetter summers and warmer winters, and the need for clean-ups after more frequent and intense storms, and also ash dieback. We also intend to fund, as a one-off, a feasibility study to consider the most suitable site for a replacement leisure facility in Padiham, and this is in addition to setting aside £500,000 contribution to a 3G pitch for Padiham and Hapton, as suggested by Conservative colleagues. Finally, it is recommended that this council makes a one-off contribution to Burnley Leisure towards Beat the Street, which is to be met from the Revenue Support Reserve if alternative funding cannot be secured. And I hope Lancashire County Council Public Health are listening to that particular point. This will be the 3rd Beat the Street, and we feel that it is important that we provide a guarantee that it can proceed. At the last council meeting, the Labour group leader proposed that a senior management review should be undertaken, rightly pointing out that it's been some time since one has been done. I think they overlooked it when they were in charge. We did, as an executive, consider this seriously. Our decision was that this was the wrong time to spend our scarce resources on undertaking this exercise. Our senior managers are currently engaged in delivering services to Burnley residents, and with the timetable imposed on us by central government for local government reorganisation, it seems likely that in a couple of years we will not be sitting in a meeting of Burnley Borough Council, and our hard-working officers will be facing massive changes which may well affect their lives and their careers. Fellow councillors, I commend this budget to you. It will enable our council to balance the books and, most importantly, to make sure that Burnley continues to thrive and improve, addressing the concerns that residents have raised with us over this year. Mr. Mayor, I beg to move the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful speech. Councillor Anwar, will you second the reports and recommendations from the executive?
I second the recommendations, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend, you move Labour Group amendment, which has been confirmed as viable by the Council's S1 section 151 officer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll say a few words, if that's okay, before I get to that point. And first of all, can I thank Councillor Lishman for involving Labour Group in some of the discussions around this year's budget. It's very welcome. It's certainly a difference to the relationship that we've had previously, and I think it's worked out well on all sides in terms of how we move forward through this process, so I certainly welcome that. In terms of just general items around the budgets itself, although I do take on board some of the things that Councillor Lishman said, that the struggles, certainly the challenges that the Labour governments have had in terms of finding money that was supposed to be there that wasn't when they took over the economy. I will say that there is one interesting statistic in the medium-term financial strategy that is encouraging, and it's the news that government grant towards our spending power is at its highest level in 7 years. So a higher contribution coming in through that route to help us fund vital services. I'm not saying everything's perfect, it isn't, and there's a long, long way to go, certainly in my view as well, to fund local government adequately to what we need it to be to get it back to where it was 14 years ago. Just touching on council tax, obviously any increase in council tax that's below the maximum possible is welcome, but I think we just need to get this into some kind of perspective to the benefit that this is going to be to our residents. I did a quick calculation earlier today, and for the majority of our households who live in a Band A property, it'll equate to about 4 pence per week that they're saving, rather than the full council tax going up to the full amount. That's how little contribution really Burnley Council now has around council tax levels overall. And when you think that for a Band D property, Lancashire County Council have put their council tax up by £82.50, it puts it into some kind of perspective, the numbers we're actually talking about here. So, although that is welcome, the other thing just to, I think that we have to think about, for that 4 pence a week, we lose over the lifespan of the medium-term financial strategy, £405,000 of spending on services, money that can go into some of the vital services that we still say we need, we haven't got. We can't rely on government for everything. If we're giving council taxpayers a break, it's because we found the money from somewhere, which is good news in one respect, but there's obviously services that still need to be funded, and over the next 5 years, it'll be over £400,000 less that we spend in that area. So, moving forward to the growth items, I certainly would like to say thank you to the executive for almost taking the whole of our amendment from last year and building it into this year's budget. 3 out of the 4 items that we proposed, spending on street scene, additional spending on green spaces and spending on town centre wardens, have all now been included and adequately funded. Last year, I remember Councillor Lishman basically telling me I didn't need to worry about it, it was all included already. One thing that wasn't included, and I tried to put in last year and it's still not there, was the household waste management service for those households who were in financial crisis. We did ask for it last year. Councillor Lishman said it was included in the budget. Nothing has happened this year, and it's not been included in this year's budget. So that is a disappointment, but overall, I don't think we can complain as an opposition that we got 3 out of 4 of last year's proposals, and hopefully we maybe get another proposal in today. Just talking about the capital budget, I would just say that there is a concern that I have when I look at the capital budget and 5-year programme. In 2021-22, the 5-year capital programme looking ahead totaled £59 million. In contrast, from 2025-26 for 5 years going forward, it's at 42.5 million. Now that is a concern about having the long-term investment into the borough and the pipeline of projects that we need. So that's a depreciation of 28% in our capital programme looking forward over the next 5 years compared to 4 years ago. Now, you know, we pride ourselves on punching above our weight. I would just suggest that those figures say that we have some work to do in that area to make sure that we have the long-term projects in our capital programme that's going to regenerate and rejuvenate our borough going forward. One thing that Councillor Lishman did mention in her speech was the senior management review. And personally, I still am keen that we should do something like that. The strategic plan I welcome. You could say it should have been done a little earlier as well, but welcome that's now here. But I still think that reviewing your management team is always a good thing and doing periodically, and I understand the challenges. And I remember at the last full council meeting where this was discussed, the leader of the Conservatives said he'd raised it at Member Structures Working Group. Unfortunately, he didn't even turn up at that Member Structures Working Group and didn't even get talked about. So that's unfortunate that I get confused who the leader of the Conservatives is. Councillor McGowan, it was who raised it, the senior management review. But we didn't have anybody at Member Structures who actually raised it. So coming to the amendment that I do want to propose, it's certainly a feeling of the Labour group that the wait times of the, and I think it's fair to say, relatively expensive bulky waste collection service at £15.40, the service levels, we believe, haven't been at the level that should be achieved for charging such an amount. So we propose to put that right with an £85,000 investment that will increase capacity by 4,000 additional slots for bulky waste collections over a year, which will reduce wait times and hopefully mean that no household has to wait for more than 2 weeks for a collection. Hopefully we'll deliver significantly better than that, but what we are asking as well when you see that amendment is that it becomes a target for this council, reporting on through the quarterly performance management, so we can see that we are getting value for the money that we're putting into that service. So really, it's all about supporting residents to do the right thing. If you're paying £15.40, you expect a decent and timely service for that money, and I think that this amendments will deliver that. Finally, I'd just like to thank, just once again, the cooperation of the executive in some of the discussions we've had around this. Hopefully the amendment does get passed tonight. I think it'll be a real benefit for our residents, and overall, really, as a group, we're pleased with how the relationship has gone through this budget setting process, and you never know, there may be more collaboration we can do in the future. You never know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, will you second that amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to second that amendment, and also thank very much Councillor Lishman and Councillor Anwar's intent on collaboration and working together to achieve more for the people of Burnley. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm conscious if members want an adjournment to discuss this, or shall we, go to a discussion? Okay, so any member? Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I have to agree with the Labour leader that it's much better without Labour being in control for collaboration, 100% in this place. I just want to ask whether Councillor Townsend, and hopefully you'll be able to answer this in your wrapping up of this amendment, whether you've done the digging on the actual details when it comes to bulky waste, because we talk about it being £15.40 to collect bulky waste, but that's not actually how much it costs the council, and we have a third party actually doing that service for us. And the service that they provide, I mean, let's just back to basics. We all want to see the area clean, and I agree with the intention to have anybody who books in bulky service getting it collected within 2 weeks. I do think the use of the word hopefully is a little bit flimsy. We hope that it will be 2 weeks. I'd want something a little bit more concrete if we had a third-party involvement. But essentially, the situation we're in right now is we have about 3,750 slots a year that are available to this council. And the income that we generated as a council over the last year was about £63,000. So then it got me thinking, what is this £85,000 that you're quoting? Where is that coming from? Because if we're getting £63,000 income, and your actual issue is with the target times, then let's deal with the target times, because is that not already built into the service level agreement that we're paying for the third party? If we were, for instance, what we pay out in the council is 48,000. So we're actually making a profit of about 15 grand off this service for the council, £15,000 profit. That says to me that the demand for this service is £63,000. If it was any higher, then we'd see that with people actually booking. But £63,000 is the demand for the service. We have to pay 48 out, so there's 15,000 that's left. Would it not be more prudent, instead of putting a random £85,000 figure in, to actually use the £15,000 that we make in profit and put that income into securing another 1,100 slots, which is what it'd work out to be, rather than just putting £85,000 in and, in your own words, hoping that the timescales come down? I just don't think that's very sensible. So unless you convince our group otherwise, I don't know why I would be inclined to support the 85,000 when we've got a third-party company delivering, and we could use the profits we make from what we charge residents to just increase the number of slots to what the actual demand is as it currently stands, and then hold them to service level agreements to collect within 2 weeks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Townsend, you have the right to reply. I was moving. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Baker.
She won't part with that. No. However, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. We don't actually use a third party, Jamie. I don't know whether we actually do it ourselves. That's the first thing. The biggest problem we've had this last whiles on bulky waste collection is that the bulky waste, when we get it now, Instead of it all going to one place like it used to, it now has to go to 3 separate places depending on it. Some amazing regulations called POP, which escape me what it is, but basically it says it's sort of like polyurethane. It's got nasties that come off if we dump it somewhere, so we have to put that somewhere else, and 2 other things as well. So it's made it a lot harder to do. It does wash its face, I'm told, even with all these extras in Jamie, so we're not actually making 15 grand profit. I was going to say, but I don't know whether I should or not, that the 2-week bulky waste hopeful bit will be met easily. Will be met. I'll not say easily, because like we do with the missed bins collections, it's nice to come back every monthly meeting and say, yeah, we've hammered it. So our target is half of that, Jamie, right? And we don't expect to go much beyond that. We can't get better than 1 week, for the simple reason is if it's on a Saturday and somebody rings up on a late Friday night, they've missed that Saturday, so it goes a week. So there's a limit of a week, but we shouldn't get to 2 weeks. We should be able to do it 1. I think that basically we can't increase the capacity at the moment. That's the problem with it. We did try to increase it with our current supplier from this April, but we can't do that. It's going back to the next year when the contract gets renewed again, that we can go up to the full 5,000. So we've got a shortfall for 1 year, which is why we need to be able to do this and get this extra money in to be able to finance it, because our current supplier can't do it, but we'll be doing it ourselves. But our officers assured me, even the other day, that we will get it down to less than 2 weeks, definitely. And our target is 1 week, and let's see how it goes on. And, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope that enables you to support us, Jamie, with your team. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to bring in Councillor McGowan because he wanted to clarify something.
Just a point of order, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Baker, I appreciate your explanation of that. You started off by saying we do it in-house, but then started talking about our suppliers. So can you confirm, because I was told today by an officer of the council that we use a third-party supplier for bulky waste. So if you could just confirm, thank you.
Oh, even better. Look at this. State of the art. We use a third party to do the 3,750, but the extra one will be possibly a different third party, or we do it ourselves. We're still working on the details, Jamie. Councillor McGowan, sorry. But whatever mate is, it's a black box to you. You shouldn't need to know it. Our residents shouldn't need to know it. All they need to know is it will happen, and we'll do it, and we'll meet their requirements and make sure we're doing the best for the people of Burnley again. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could address fellow colleagues as councillors, as Councillor McGowan, please. Yes, I've got Councillor Anwar and then Councillor Broughton and then Councillor Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to make a couple of points. I think all residents, when they pay for a service, and if that service doesn't, do what it says it will do, i.e., the collection doesn't take place within the desired time frame, then obviously residents are not going to be happy about that. And the demands on the service do fluctuate, and as we saw over this winter, sometimes there can be a backlog as well. But having said all that, I think the fact that these amendments come forward and we do have, having spoken to Councillor Lishman, who's in charge of resources, that there is a possibility to put this extra resource in of £85,000, which would increase the collections from 4,000 capacity to 7,000. But what the aim would then be, and this hopefully answers Councillor McGowan's question, is hopefully it will be done in 2 weeks. No, the aim would then be is that a 7-day turnaround, as opposed to a 2-week turnaround, which would ensure then that there's spare capacity, which would then in turn go back to what Councillor Townsend was saying earlier on around that spare capacity would then be used to support those residents and cleanups where they need it the most, particularly that support for vulnerable residents that are working with downtown. So hopefully it will have a knock-on effect and impact much wider than that, and we as a council will be getting value for money for the resource that we're putting in for those contractors. So
So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Broughton? Is that right? Or yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm a little bit confused because we seem to be saying, on one hand, that we've got a third-party supplier that's doing, it's costing us 48,000 a year, but they're not doing the job properly because they're not doing what you want them to do, because obviously we want it to be within a week. So I'm just a little bit curious why we seem to be doing it two ways. So we've got a third party that's not really doing it to the standard that we want to. Why are we not giving the extra? Why are we not having a conversation with them, and if there is extra money, giving it to them to provide the extra service? Why are we sort of splitting it and having the third party doing part of the job and then we're sort of stepping in with the rest? It seems to me there's a problem, and instead of addressing it, we're sort of patching it up with £85,000 that we're going to throw at it ourselves. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Haig?
Mr Mayor, I was going to say I'm more than happy for Councillor... Okay. I mean, on that, from what I heard from Councillor Baker, Mr Mayor, it was that the current contract with that supplier, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Baker, doesn't ask for this level of capacity that we're wanting to put into it. Therefore, they're not doing anything that they're not meeting targets as such. They just don't have targets this large, and we want to put more money into up our capacity. But my original point, Mr Mayor, I'm sure Councillor Baker can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but my original point, Mr Mayor, was I do think there's an opportunity with this for there to be increased uptake in the service. I know when I went to book a bulky waste collection myself online, like I raised in the last full council, it was going to be over 4 weeks, so I didn't take up the service. I'm sure there will be many more people like me that think, oh, I'll get the council to collect it, log online, it's a month away, and you think, no, I'll find something else, I'll find another way of doing it. Whereas if I logged on and it was a week away or 2 weeks away, I probably would have purchased the service. So I think in time with the monitoring, we'll see, this is a one-off investment, we'll see if it's worked or not. It doesn't have to be in the next year budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haig. Any other member? Thank you. Councillor hold on. I've got Councillor Townsend. You have the right of reply as the mover of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That was an interesting debate, and I think most of the issues did come out there in terms of like what the benefits of this will be in terms of you know, we are expecting that demand will be higher, as well as bringing down the time. And I will say to Councillor McGowan, I probably did use the wrong words when I said hopefully. My expectation is fully that the maximum time would be 2 weeks, and from what I hear, we should be getting down to 1 week. But I think if we can say to our residents that you will never have to wait for more than 2 weeks for a collection, I think we've moved a long way forward in terms of at least a level of expectation. And I think it's always better to exceed expectations. So if you say we're going to achieve 2 weeks and we can actually do it in 1 week, I think that'll be a really positive thing for the reputation of this council delivering a service. And I think it's really important as well for those peaks and troughs that did come out again, that when there is spare capacity in the system, that basically that resource can go on to additional street cleansing. We all know that the problems that we have had in that area, so it's not like that these people will be sat around doing nothing, waiting for the phone to ring. There is work for them to do. So I'm hoping that everybody can get behind this. I would remind, it is a one-off. We're hoping that basically it proves itself and it can then be built in to any future contract with our suppliers moving forward in terms of a service level that we expect as a council moving forward. So I thank everybody for their contribution and hope it gets support in here this evening. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret Lishman, you have a right to reply as the mover of the original motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
On the amendment.
Executive is minded to accept this. It complements the other initiatives. It is for a 12-month period until the new increased capacity contract is in place. I think it's really important that we make a promise of a 2-week target, and I agree with Councillor Townsend. The beauty of this particular amendment is we had the opportunity to sit down with officers from Street Scene and actually work this through and know very clearly that any spare capacity, when there aren't bulky waste collections, those individuals will be used elsewhere for street cleaning and all other work. So I think making a promise of 2 weeks, hoping we can exceed it, and not be in a position which we are at the moment when people ring up and they have to wait a much longer time. So, as I say, we are minded to accept the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We will now go to the recorded vote on the Labour Group amendment. Please wait until the microphone is in front of you before you cast your vote clearly in it. Okay? So you're either saying for or against or abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor has outlined the instructions very eloquently, so I'm just going to read the names out, starting with Councillor Aurangzeb Ali.
For.
Councillor Afrasiab Anwar.
For.
Councillor Lee Ashworth.
Abstain.
Councillor Howard Baker.
For.
Councillor Gail Barton.
For.
Councillor Gordon Birtwistle.
For.
Councillor Helen Bridges.
For.
Councillor Charlie Briggs.
For.
Councillor Margaret Brindle. For. Councillor Joanne Broughton. I repeat that. Councillor Joanne Broughton. Councillor Ashley Brown. Councillor Saeed Chowdhury. Councillor Barbara Dole.
For.
Councillor Ivor Emore. Councillor Sue Graham.
For.
Councillor Gemma Haig.
For.
Councillor Alex Hall.
For.
Councillor John Harbour. For. Councillor Bill Horrocks. Councillor Alan Hosker. Councillor Martin Hurt.
For.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Shah Hussain.
For.
Councillor Jacqueline Inkle.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Ishtiaq.
For.
Councillor Nusrat Kazmi.
For.
Councillor Saida Kazmi.
For.
Councillor Anne Kelly.
For.
Councillor Lubna Khan.
For.
Councillor Jack Lorna. Councillor Alan Lewis. Councillor Gordon Lishman.
For.
Councillor Margaret Lishman.
For.
Councillor Sherish Lawn. Councillor Jamie McGowan. Councillor Neil Mottershead. Councillor Paul Reynolds. Councillor Christine Solis. Councillor Sean Sproul. Councillor Mike Steele. Councillor Jeff Sumner. Welcome
For.
back. Councillor Mark Townsend.
For.
Councillor Andy Waddington. Councillor Don Whittaker. And Councillor Fiona Wilde.
That amendment is carried and becomes part of the substantive motion. Can I ask Councillor McGowan to move his motion? Amendment. So this is now on the substantive motion, Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to propose the Conservative budget amendment. Members can see it involves freezing our portion of council tax, and that's something our group thinks is important for council taxpayers. But first off, I do want to acknowledge the effort that has gone into this executive's budget. For the first time since I was elected to this council, we as a group were consulted. And to be fair, on the whole, we've been listened to. Getting the exec to include what they have in the budget was relatively easy because they're shared priorities. And so they should be. We all want to see certain parts of our borough cleaned up, and so extra resources for that is great. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. Okay. Additional grass cutting, a key function of this council, is also welcome, as is the return of, and I dare to say it, the community skips, as Councillor Alan Oscar calls them. But what I'm really happy to see included is a commitment to 3G football pitches in Hapton and Padiham. This is an issue that I've banged on about for quite a while now, so to see £500,000 set aside to get the ball rolling is a huge win, a massive step in what has been a long campaign to get something in place for all the teams in my area. And I want to put on record my thanks to both the council leader and the exec member for finance for listening to what we've been saying on that. So now I'm done with the praise, however valid it is. I want to move on to the reasons why we've brought this amendment. We're calling for a council tax freeze, something I'm yet to see in this place, but something which I think is long overdue. Look, it should come as no surprise to any of you that I'm calling for it. After all, this council has supported our watering spending on design work and consultants over the last 12 months, and it wasn't hard for me to have predicted a council tax rise were coming. Not when the council signed off on over £1 million worth of design work for places like Townley Park and Burnley Market, not to mention the others. Yeah, I know that we take a different approach to how council finances work. That's fine. I've made my position clear, why I don't believe we should spend these sums on design fees, and how I want to see major changes in the way we work with infrastructure projects. But my main point on the budget is this. We are raising council tax to pay for extra items in the budget, which I happen to agree we need, and I've laid it out, some of them already. At the same time, though, we currently have a pot of money set in a bank account named the Cost of Living Reserve. For those unaware, this was originally called the COVID-19 Reserve and was a chunk of cash given to councils during COVID-19 to help residents through the pandemic. We as a council just never spent it. We never spent it all anyway. But thankfully the pandemic's now over. So what our motion proposes is to use this money, instead of raising council tax, to pay for the one-off items which we have, as we're being told, taking us over the budget which requires a council tax rise. That means that instead of asking for residents to dig further into their pockets this year, we would instead use money that was provided years ago by the last government to help in a pandemic that's now over, rather than letting it sit idle in the bank. I don't really see this as a crazy idea, and is why I recommend the motion to the council. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Broughton, will you second that motion?
I second the amendment and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Because we've had this motion earlier in the afternoon, would members like to take an adjournment to discuss it or not, or shall we make progress? Make progress, excellent. Any member on this amendment? Councillor Barton and then Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So we have this conversation every single year, and I'm not quite sure why we have to keep repeating the same things to Councillor McGowan, about how finances actually work. There's a lot of fake news out there, so I'd just like to quote a really reputable source. This is the burnley.gov.uk website, Council Tax Explained page. if I can just quote, in 2024-25, we decided to increase Burnley Council's share of your overall tax bill by 2.99%, or 13 pence a week for the large majority of our residents. If we had not agreed to this increase, we would have had to find an extra 233,000 from our reserves for this year and all future years. That is a shortfall of well over 1 million over the next 5 years alone. Now, in the Conservative amendment, I can't see any reference to the figures that we're going to lose out of future years by freezing council tax at no increase this year whatsoever, which does not seem very financially prudent to me. Just referring back to my earlier point about the financial situation of many of our residents, I am among the huge proportion of Burnley residents who live in a Band A council tax. I, as a full-time working person, I'm not eligible for any discounts to help me get along, but I have to be honest, the less than £5 extra I will need to pay to Burnley Borough Council for this year, I think that's just about affordable. So I appreciate the Conservatives want to help people out, but the people who will most benefit from this proposal are those with the broader shoulders who live in the higher tier property bands in the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for Councillor Barton. I think she's certainly stolen a lot of my thunder there in terms of laying out the madness of Tory economics, really. They turn up here year after year with a zero council tax rise or a reduction in council tax, and always just put 1 year in front of you. Unable to comprehend that you have to pay this year after year after year. And these 162,000 that he's got in this amendment actually equates, when you freeze the whole council tax for this year, it would add up to 1.25 million over the lifetime of the medium-term financial strategy. Now, we've already, in an earlier debate, talked about Northamptonshire and the problems that they had. And Councillor McGowan seems to have taken basically the lessons from Northamptonshire, thinking it was some kind of success story, just to keep continually trying to stay, we can't increase council tax. When they actually did it and didn't increase council tax for a few years, they ended up going bust. It's only because we've had a number of administrations over a number of years that have sorted the finances out in this council, and we now have an adequate level of reserves to be able to spend prudently on some growth items, but to simply just throw it away in this fashion on just funding 1 year's council tax increase is ridiculous. And I would just point out, it's a bit rich. Certainly, I know he hasn't spoken on this item, and perhaps he does want to keep quiet, but the leader of the Conservatives, who sits at County Hall, has just put an £82.50 council tax hike on the precept for households in this borough. And we're talking here about saving us pennies in comparison. And I can't resist myself from last year. I know Councillor McGowan, when I put an amendment forward, basically said I'd done my calculations on the back of a fag packet. Well, if this came to a book of matches, you'd be lucky that you could write this on. It's ridiculous. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thought then when Councillor Townsend said that about writing something on the back of a fag packet, I thought he was going to say in a WhatsApp group, but anyway, what I will say is, bringing it back to the debate, I think
we've heard from every single member or colleagues from across the chamber about the budget and how it's been put together. And it's been put together through true collaboration, actually working together and listening to what what residents have got to say, but also what members have got to say on what they would like to see as priorities. So, having said that, and we've sat down and spoken to the Conservative group, so for this motion or this amendment to come so late in the day and to come today when there was ample opportunity to have that discussion prior, it's not something that we will be able to support, especially when all that hard work has gone into pulling this budget together. And I just want to remind everybody as well that across the whole of Lancashire, every single authority, district council has put their council tax up by 3%. We're the only ones that have gone and put it up by 2%, and Ribble Valley being the other one. Sorry, my apologies. And so, for the difference that a council tax freeze would make, in real terms for residents, I think if we're honest, it's nothing more than grandstanding is what we would be doing if we were to do that. So for that reason, I don't think we should be supporting this amendment. But as I said, there are lots and lots of other things that have been delivered as part of this budget for the benefit of residents and making a real difference. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McGowan. Sorry, any other member? No? Councillor McGowan? Councillor Hosker. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Councillor McGowan, as the mover of the amendment, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing that is said to me is that I am consistent, and if anything, I am consistent in calling for council tax freezes. And it's a badge of honour for me, Councillor Barton. I will respond to a number of points raised, and I'll go back to Councillor Barton in this. People have said to me from a number of meetings that we've had full council with finances, it's so condescending towards you, Jamie, and I think Councillor Barton really fell into that trap there by the condescending nature that she talks about finances. After voting for £300,000 for design fees for Townley Park, even though we are seeing nothing with it, it's just for the drawings, and also for the other things that she knows about. But I'm not going to engage in the class warfare with Councillor Barton about which council taxpayers get more off or less off. Some council taxpayers pay more, some pay less. Councillor Townsend, with the back of a fag packet, I did accuse you once of having details on the back of a fag packet because it was scant. But considering that I'm talking about a saving of £162,000, and you've just passed an amendment for £85,000 when you didn't know that a third party was actually the one delivering it for us, I think that's a bit rich. I am not a county councillor, I am a borough councillor. That's another thing. So we can talk about county all we want, but they have a different service to provide. We provide the services we have. And I'm not going to lie to any councillor in here and say that residents in Haptonwood Park have said to me numerous times, Jamie, I do not want to pay higher council tax. And the only area of influence that I have is in this chamber. So that's exactly why I've brought it. I do appreciate Councillor Anwar's remarks, and I do appreciate, and I were serious when I said in my opening that I appreciate his and Councillor Lishman's involvement with the Conservative group when formulating this budget. We've got some really good things in it. The football pitches in Padiham is one big standout, Padiham and Hapton. But it's not what I see as the madness is spending over £1 million on consultation fees that we've done over the last 12 months. And that's not me not understanding council finances, that's me getting involved in the council to change council finances, because I think that we get ripped off. I won't say any more on it, other than we have the cash in the bank that was provided years ago to help people with the cost of living. Our suggestion was to spend that money, but I do respect the councillors' other councillors' position in not wanting to do that, and I will leave it there, knowing full well that this motion is going to fail. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan. And Councillor Margaret Lishman, You have the final right to reply on the motion as a mover of the original motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of the points that I was going to make have already been made. I will only make two. I was disappointed to see this. I was disappointed that this didn't come up in the discussions that we had. And I'm disappointed that this proposal would, if it was passed, would leave us with an annual recurring debt of £162,000 a year. And that's not a small amount for a council of this size. We will not be accepting, and I will not recommend voting for this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. I thought you had 2 points. Thank you, Councillor Lishman. Oh, did you? Right, okay.
You missed the
Do
semicolon.
apologise. Right, okay. We will now go to a recorded vote again, and same as we did last time with the Labour amendment. Please wait till you get the microphone in front of you, and please either say for, against, or abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Start with Councillor Aurangzeb Ali. Do you vote for, against, or abstain from the motion? Councillor Afrasiab Anwar.
Against.
Councillor Lee Ashworth.
For.
Councillor Howard Baker.
Against.
Councillor Gail Barton.
Against.
Councillor Gordon Birtwistle.
Against.
Councillor Helen Bridges.
Against.
Councillor Charlie Briggs.
Against.
Councillor Margaret Brindle.
Against.
Councillor Joanne Broughton. Councillor Ashley Brown. Councillor Saeed Chowdhury. Councillor Barbara Dole.
Against.
Councillor Ivor Emo. Councillor Sue Graham.
Against.
Councillor Gemma Haig. Councillor Alex Hall.
Against.
Councillor John Harbour.
Against.
Councillor Bill Horrocks. Councillor Alan Hosker. Councillor Martin Hurt.
Against.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Shah Hussain.
Against.
Councillor Jacqueline Inkle. Councillor Mohammed Ishtiaq. Councillor Nusrat Kazmi. Councillor Saida Kazmi.
Against.
Councillor Anne Kelly. Councillor Lubna Khan. Councillor Jack Lorna. Councillor Alan Lewis. Councillor Gordon Lishman.
Against.
Councillor Margaret Lishman.
Against.
Councillor Sherry Sloan.
Against.
Councillor Jamie McGowan. Councillor Neil Mottershead. Councillor Paul Reynolds. Councillor Christine Solis.
Against.
Councillor Sean Sproul. Councillor Mike Steele. Councillor Jeff Sumner.
Against.
Councillor Mark Townsend.
Against.
Councillor Andy Waddington. Councillor Don Whittaker. Councillor Fiona Wilde.
Thank you. That motion, that amendment was not carried. So we're going to go to the original motion with the substantive amendment included. And Councillor Margaret Lishman, you have the right of reply. Or any other member, sorry, any other member.
Sorry, I did reserve the right to speak.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
I was asking on any other member on that, no? Councillor Anwar.
Okay, yeah, no, just to wrap up really, and I think the points all that have been made previously around how we work together with all groups really to do the best that we can for our residents, and you know that has been at the heart of everything that we've done.
but there are a number of things that I'm really, really happy to see a part of this budget, and one of them is that commitment that if we can't find the funding from elsewhere, that Beat the Street will go ahead. And Councillor Lishman is absolutely right. I hope other colleagues from the County Public Health are listening and will contribute something towards that, because it makes a massive difference to the health and well-being of our residents, and it's a fantastic initiative. Another thing I'm really, really pleased to see return, which was actually taken away the year I got elected, so I've never actually benefited from it, which was the WAF funding. So I'm really pleased to see that return, because what it means is that those of us that are in roles where, as executive members, sometimes we can make decisions for our residents or for the whole of the town. But for wider members, I think what the WAF funding allows is actually to go out there in your wards, in your communities, to make a real difference. And I think, to get engaged in that, and I think it'll make all members feel more involved in that decision-making process, in a sense as well, and really contributing to their communities. And I'm really excited about the community clean-ups, and particularly, I know they're not community skips in a sense, but for me, I think they will serve a similar purpose with the clean-ups in the wards, CCTV, but particularly being somebody who's spent the past 25 years, or the best part of, working in grassroots football. I'm really pleased that we were able to make that contribution or commitment of 500,000 for a new pitch in Paddy Moor Hapton once a location has been identified for that. But one final point I just want to make is that, and I listened to comments from colleagues about a strategic management review and how it's long overdue, and I'm all for that. But what I want to do is actually put it on record and thank our officers, our senior officers, for all the work that they've done, not just on this budget, but on all the work that they do for Burnley Council and for our residents, because they do a sterling job. And I think that needs to be recognised. And I've seen comments in the press about, £50,000 salary, is described as a fat cat. I will tell you, in the current day and age, somebody on a £50,000 salary is not a fat cat. I've seen a fat cat, and it's basically, it's just down the road. We've got a local authority that have just spent £95,000 recruiting an interim chief executive, and they're paying him best part of £1,000 a day. And I think, that we need to be really, really proud of the officers that we've got, and they work really, really, really hard for our borough, and we should be commending them. And yes, we'll carry out a review, but I think LGR might do that for us anyway. But I want to have it on record. We're able to deliver this budget because of the quality and standard of our officers, as well as a fantastic executive. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other member? Thank you. Councillor Margaret Lishman, you have the final right of reply to the original motion added with the substantive motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not my intention to give you all another speech. You'll be delighted to know. It's been an interesting debate. I am extremely grateful to colleagues on both sides who have taken the time to discuss and suggest things for the budget. I think it has been a much more productive way of going about things, and has allowed us to have proper consideration of those ideas, rather than trying to assess whether they're good or not on the night where we sit in this chamber. So, Mr. Mayor, I just beg to move.
Thank you. We will now go to recorded and vote on the whole budget. And once you get the mic, please say for, against, or abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully this is the last recorded vote for tonight. Councillor Aurangzeb Ali.
For.
Councillor Frasiab Anwar.
For.
Councillor Lee Ashworth.
Abstain.
Councillor Howard Baker.
For.
Councillor Gail Barton.
For.
Councillor Gordon Birtwistle.
For.
Councillor Helen Bridges.
For.
Councillor Charlie Briggs.
For.
Councillor Margaret Brindle.
For.
Councillor Joanne Broughton.
Abstain.
Councillor Ashley Brown. Councillor Saeed Chowdhury. Councillor Barbara Dole.
4.
Councillor Ivor Emar.
Abstain.
Councillor Sue Graham.
4.
Councillor Gemma Haig. Councillor Alex Hall.
4.
Councillor John Harbour.
4.
Councillor Bill Horrocks. Councillor Alan Hosker.
Abstain.
Councillor Martin Hurt.
4.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Shah Hussain.
4.
Councillor Jacqueline Inkle. Councillor Mohammed Ishtiaq.
4.
Councillor Nusrat Kazmi. Councillor Saeeda Kazmi.
4.
Councillor Anne Kelly. Councillor Lubna Khan.
4.
Councillor Jack Lorna. Councillor Alan Lewis. Councillor Gordon Lishman.
4.
Councillor Margaret Lishman.
4.
Councillor Sherish Lawn.
4.
Councillor Jamie McGowan.
Abstain.
Councillor Neil Mottershead. Councillor Paul Reynolds. Councillor Christine Solis.
4.
Councillor Sean Sprowell. Councillor Mike Steele.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeff Sumner.
4.
Councillor Mark Townsend.
4.
Councillor Andy Waddington. Councillor Don Whittaker.
Abstain.
Last but not least, Councillor Fiona Wilde.
This motion is carried. Congratulations. Moving on to agenda item 6L, pay policy. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you move the recommendations in the report?
Move the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Anwar, will you second the recommendations?
Second the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Any member? Councillor Barton?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to take a moment to celebrate the women, some of which will be in this room, who fought for the right for women to have bank accounts which only came in their own name, which only actually came into force 50 years ago, which does mean that some of our councillors here, when they were young women, they were not allowed to hold bank accounts in their own name. Today, we still have women retiring with a pension gap of roughly £100,000 below that of men. And so I'd just like to remind people how important it is that we continuously monitor gender pay and aim for equity for all going forward.
Any other member? Thank you. Any other member? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? This item is now carried. Agenda item 6, revision of standing orders for contracts. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you move the recommendation in the report?
Move those recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Anwar, will you second the recommendations?
Second the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Any member? Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? This item is carried. Agenda item 6N, constitutional reporting and updates. At a meeting of group leaders on 25th February, it was agreed that a pragmatic approach would be taken to changes to committee memberships that are required to ensure political balance of the council. This is outlined in section 6 of page 424 of the agenda pack. Since the council agenda was published, we have received nominations that were requested. From Labour Group, Councillor Barton is to be added to the licensing committee in place of Councillor Briggs, and from the Labour Group, Councillor Barton is to be removed from the scrutiny committee. From the Green Group, Councillor Hurt is to be added to the Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Townsend, will you move the nominations on behalf of the Labour Group?
I so move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lorna, will you move the nomination on behalf of the Green Group? Thank you. Councillor Anwar, will you move the recommendations in the report with addition of these nominations?
I move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you second those?
I second those, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor McGowan?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A bit tongue-in-cheek this, but I actually am minded to vote against this purely because we'll lose Councillor Barton on the Scrutiny Committee and I'm not happy about it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Good call. Good call, Jay. Councillor
I
McGowan.
second that.
Yeah, I second that as well.
I'll second that.
Councillor Barton will be dearly missed, I'm sure. Any other member? No? I now propose we vote on these recommendations en bloc. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. True to form. Any abstentions? That is carried. And agenda item 6.0, appointment of mayor and deputy mayor. We'll let the people who've made a... Councillor Anwar, will you move the recommendations in the report with the addition of these nominations?
I move the report, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you second those?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? I propose we
Apart
vote...
from Mr Mayor, I was wondering why Councillor Chowdhury was wearing his posh suit today. I've got my answer.
Sorry. And the report is noted. We don't have to vote on this. Agenda right. Yeah, shall we call them in?
So
Yeah.
is he not appointed?
So Councillor Reynolds will be the mayor for 25 and 26, and Councillor Chowdhury will be the deputy mayor elect for 2025 to 26.
Just say Saeed won.
Saeed.
Say Saeed won.
They were close.
But the suit pushed us over the edge.
Has he
Oh,
gone?
I like it.
Has he gone home?
Oh, dear, dear, dear.
Is it? Okay, thank you. Well, Paul, you're brave, you've come in. So that's good. Agenda item 7. Any questions?
None have been received, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes the business. Before I do, though, did you bring the Smarty money?
She's going to give you the money.
Please give it to Jackie or Margaret or...
No.
Oh, sorry, to Anne Kelly. Please, if you could.
She's going to give you the money.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the business of tonight's meeting. Enjoy your evening.
Well done.